1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
Diamonds in the sunset, now your time has come. A pretty yellow bird fly
All right, that's 25 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Very interesting conversation about to happen based on the book that we've been looking at. The book is called What to Do When You're Dead. A former atheist interviews the source of infinite being. And on the phone is Sondra Sneed. She's the author of the book. It says here she's a former atheist with secrets. So we're going to find out what those secrets are. She's a science and technology writer for Fortune 500 companies, the former editor-in-chief of an industry trade publication, and a photographer for PricewaterhouseCoopers in New York. And did she say she's in New York, Robin?
No, she's in Houston, Texas.
Oh, in Houston. Okay. Sondra Sneed. Good morning, Sondra.
Good morning.
Thank you for being on the air with us today.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to our conversation.
So did you move to Houston from New York?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Was it culture shock for you?
Oh, yes. Big culture shock. In fact, it was a bigger culture shock coming from New York to Houston than it was from my hometown of Kansas City to New York, believe it or not.
Oh, really? Oh, that's kind of funny. Okay, so you kind of crisscross back and forth, right?
Yeah, I went to New York to, live a bigger life as a photographer, and then I left New York to have a personal life, to find a personal life.
So we make assumptions out of people. We make assumptions of people based on where they're from. I'm from New York. A lot of people think all New Yorkers are atheists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. I mean, some of the biggest cathedrals in America, at least, are up in New York, but still, we get that kind of. And you would think Kansas would be. Everybody's got to have a religion in Kansas, right? So where does? Tell me your story. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say, in my hometown, there was a church on every corner, and people would, when they greet you, they wanted to know what church did you belong to in order to make an assumption about you, as to what your beliefs are. But for me, after college, I no longer, I don't think that I ever believed in God, and because I've never had any experience at all with God. But deep in my adult life, I completely divorced myself from any kind of belief in something that I couldn't see, smell, taste, touch, or hear.
Right.
And New York is a good place to be if you are an atheist.
But there are two things to mention here, and I want to make sure, because the book is so fascinating. The way you've written it, the dialogue that's taking place between yourself and God, just is fascinating, and it rings true. I guess that's the best way I can say it. It rings true, and I'm sure some people who adhere to absolute biblical principles might question some things, but I'm not a real biblical scholar, so for me it rings true. And the one thing I wanted to say is, when somebody says to me, "Do you believe in God?" It's almost like, do you believe in Santa Claus? It's like, do you believe he exists? And yes, I believe God exists. But more importantly than that, I believe in him in the same way that I would believe in a close friend. In other words, I don't doubt that my close friend exists. But more importantly, I believe that close friend is going to be there for me if I have a flat tire and I need to call from 100 miles away. That's what I mean by believing in somebody, that person is going to be there. In this case, that deity will be there for me.
I think it's important to talk about people's experience with God, because if you haven't had an experience with God, there's no way to even imagine God in your life in some way. And I don't like the word belief. Belief is something that you do, that you take a stand on, and it could be a result of an experience, or it could be the result of observing someone else's experience.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. I agree. I say all the time. There's very little that I know. I can tell you what I know in probably one page. What I believe, though, is most of what I say I know, because because we use those words. Oh, I know, but I don't really know. I only believe in many cases.
Do you think that people can have experiences, but those experiences are hidden? Maybe in your time of growing up, there were some experiences that you had happen to you, but you just didn't realize it.
I think that's true. In fact, there was one experience I had as a child that I can swear was God with me, and that was, I was probably about 6 or 7, and there was an Easter egg hunt, and right in front of me, looked down right at my feet, there was an egg that I didn't remember seeing before, but I picked it up, and I felt like I heard all these voices of excitement around me, and I opened it up, and it was a little note that said that I had won, and I'd won this bunny. But this feeling that, as if I was led to that egg, and then there was great jubilation around me that I found it, and then I won the bunny. It was just a very special experience. That is the only experience I can recall as a child that harkens back to this experience with God that I had.
So let's talk about the book, and just one more question before we talk about the book, just so that we understand. It says here former atheist, which implies that you are no longer an atheist. It also says with secrets. So do we learn what those secrets are, or do they remain secrets?
Well, the secret is that in my professional life as a writer for industry, all the while interviewing scientists and engineers and translating their high-minded knowledge for laypersons, that I was also interviewing the creator of the universe, the highest mind. And the secret that I've held is because in 2004, when this all began, I had lost a job that I loved and a man I loved, and I was living in Sequoia, New Jersey, just outside of Manhattan, and I had, I found myself going down into the basement to write because these feelings of panic and loneliness were coming over me, and they were very overwhelming. And so I would go in the basement to write and write and write, and I filled up a whole spiral notebook of my lament, and then I opened up a brand new notebook, and I had my pencil on the top line about ready to write, and before I knew the pencil was moving, it stopped. And then I looked down, and what was written was, unemployed, ? It is my assertion you are employed by me. And then that's the moment my notebook went from this monologue I was having to a dialogue, and I wound up filling up 10 spiral notebooks over a year of solitude, 10 spiral notebooks, taking dictation from God.
So that does that have a name? That ability to do that? Is there a word for that, or a phrase?
I call it God scribe. I'm a God scribe.
Okay.
Moses was a God scribe. Mary Baker Eddy, who founded the Christian Science sect of Christianity, she was a God scribe. There's been a number of them. And Neil Donald Walsh is a God scribe.
Wow.
And so it's just the ability to take this great vibrational signature of the being we call God and interpret it into language. And it began initially through the scripted word, my arm and my hand all being this unity with this vibration, great vibration being. I call God also the great wave of being that is through every cell of the universe. So
suddenly you were no longer an atheist. You believed in God. It may not be the same God that was being taught in the churches in Kansas, but you believed in it.
Well, it absolutely is the same God. When people don't quite understand the teaching, that's a different story. Mm-hmm. But there have been God scribes that are throughout the Bible, and people who are deep biblical scholars do see a correlation between the words that God has given me and the words that they've read in the Bible. But God has also told me that man has completely tainted and ruined a great deal of the original God scribe's work. That in the Bible, the book of Genesis, for instance, God has given me a new story of the Adam and Eve, which is the old original story that was told tens of thousands of years ago, passed down through oral tradition. But when it was finally written down, 2/3 of the population were slaves. So they couldn't very well tell these slaves that they were born free, which is what this true story of Adam and Eve is about. The moment when Adam and Eve disobeyed God was the moment they began to think for themselves. And this was, for God, the purpose of telling them not to do something. What's the best way to get someone to do something? Tell them not to do it. So that was the moment when human beings were able to think for themselves, and God knew that God has created co-creative beings that could create as He creates, or God is not a He, but as God creates, and could co-create with God on earth. But they completely tainted that because they had to tell a story of what happens when you disobey the master to these slaves. So that's why they changed the story, reinterpreted it, and then all the women of the time were so beaten down that the story of Eve's great purpose was completely ruined and taken out of the story because they couldn't see a relationship between the story of Eve in this story and then the women of the time.
So the way it's written, you feel, is wrong. Why would God allow that book to continually be reprinted then? I mean, you would think that if God wasn't happy with what the scribes wrote, that He would figure out a way to make that book end, that we wouldn't still have copy after copy after copy.
God can only work through being, and so human being is the only way that God can work through our world, or only way God will work through our world. And the messengers that have come since that time have been many, but they have to go through periods of not knowing in order to come into their knowing, and then they have to have the courage to step out and actually do what they were born to do. And as many people who have been given these messages, only a small percentage have the courage to actually come out into the world and do what I'm doing now.
What about the stories that are in the New Testament, the stories of Jesus? What are your thoughts on those stories?
Again, Jesus was definitely a man who discovered God and who tried desperately to give the story of God. But look what happened to him. And he didn't even get all of it out and written down in his own time.
Well, he didn't write anything, though, right? I mean,
right.
No, everybody else wrote the stories, I thought.
Right. Well, there you go.
But
so that's what the world does to people who bring a new story into the history of God.
The book that we're talking about is written by our guest Sondra Sneed. The book is called "What to Do When You're Dead." So let's talk about that question right there. What to do when you're dead? The one thing I've always thought about, Sondra, is that if I die and I go to some gatekeeper, maybe it's St. Peter, maybe it's somebody else, and I'm at that point, and I say, okay, can I come in? And well, what do you want to do when you get in here?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I don't know, can I be an angel or something? He might say, well, do you have any experience? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't have. Maybe I helped an old lady across the street. Does that count? And do I have to play a harp? I prefer the guitar. Is it possible? So what happened? What did you learn from the scribing experience?
Well, mainly that you're an eternal being, and that you've had many incarnations, not just this one. You come to incarnate in order to raise your vibrational signature from spirit. When you're in spirit, you cannot change your mind. There is no body in order to contain memory, in order to contain what you were, what you are, and what you will be all at once. So the body is a way of containing memory so that you can go from one state of being to another consciously. You can consciously move your state of being. And it's through that learning that when you pass, your spirit has a higher level of experience from that body being, that body's experience.
Do you know what I've often thought? I've often thought that just so you know, that Rob and I are both closing in on 60 years old.
Okay.
And in 60 years of time, I can look back on some things that I wish I had never done, because, I've made mistakes, and I've probably hurt some people, and regret all of anything I've ever been guilty of. I feel bad about. But then I think, well, maybe that was just part of trying to become a better person. So right now, theoretically, I'm a better person than I was when I was 20. Okay, so that if I die and come back again, am I going to make those same mistakes again? Or am I going to be like a 60-year-old? If I died today, would I be a 60-year-old spirit in a 1-year-old baby? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, there's no such thing as mistakes. There's just no such thing.
Oh, I don't know.
I
made
believe in mistakes.
Your thinking on that is based on what human beings appear to be, not what they are. So it appears as if you've hurt people, or you've made yourself do things that you ought not do, or you've connected with people you ought not connect with. But these things that have happened have shaped you into a new being, and they were on purpose. There is absolutely nothing about it that is a mistake. My parents did not make a mistake for winding up separated when I was 2 years old. It come to find out, that's exactly the way God wanted it to be, so that I was raised without a mother, and I learned to bury my love in God rather than in a mother. And all of these things that I have learned along the way that seemed like mistakes, how can I go and teach others who seem to be going through these quote-unquote mistakes that they are not having mistakes if I haven't already had them as well?
Well, and here's my debate with that. If I do something that I perceive as a mistake and regret it, then I'm not going to do it again. And while that mistake, maybe that first mistake teaches me to not do it again, if I don't consider it a mistake, I might do it again. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right. But there's other ways of looking at it that aren't so damning to the self.
Well, let's say I've never done this, just so you know, just my little disclaimer. But let's say I robbed a bank. Well, no, let's do something. Forget rob. Let's say I hurt somebody. Let's say I killed somebody.
Okay.
Oh.
You never did.
No, I never did. Never
Disclaimer.
would. Never did. Never would. Right. But let's say I did, and not only am I regretting killing somebody, but I'm regretting taking away somebody's father from the family that lost him, or mother from the family that lost her. Mm-hmm. I'm regretting the people who loved that person. I'm regretting what I did to that person. Now, the rest of my life, I live with this burden that I did this terrible, terrible thing. Mm-hmm. I can't ever consider that not a mistake. That's always in my mind going to be, that was a huge mistake. No? Sondra?
Again, there are other ways of looking at it that don't turn you into such a victim of circumstances. You know, when you blame yourself, you are also giving yourself a cause for the misinterpretation of the event. The event itself could have been heavenly made. It could have been very much as the design plan for your life. But in order for you to value life in this lifetime, for your spirit to value the quality of life for each individual, you had to completely demolish it in someone else. And these other people that are part of that whole narrative could have been part of your soul group, and every one of you made that intention before you were born on this earth.
It could be, yeah. In other words, a pre-decided decision before you're born.
Do you celebrate Christmas?
Well, I, we do the traditional things, I guess you could say, but I've recently, God has given me an understanding about Christmas, what Christmas really is. Do you want to know?
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. So the original story of Christmas was about Christmas. And Christmas has to do with kindness. And because the word Christ originally meant God on earth, which means that when we are kind, and through our kindness, we are expressing our kinship to God. We are of a kind of God. And as we express this kindness, this kinship with our fellow man, we make God on earth. And this is the birth of Christ within us. It's not the birth of a baby Jesus. The birth of Christ is the birth of kindness, that is the Godness, that is the kinship of God. And that's why Jesus taught to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, because that is when we express that kinship to God as we love our neighbor.
And if the man that we refer to as Jesus was teaching, then he was born. And if he was born, then there's no reason why we can't celebrate the birth of the man who taught us all the things you just talked about.
Right. There's no reason that we can't, but it's not the truth of what Christmas is. Christmas is Christness within each of us and kindness that we express toward our fellow man. That's what the story of Dickens' Christmas Carol tried to teach.
Yes, it sure did. In this book, you are interviewing God, and you've done it in such a way that it is very compelling, and it's one of those things where most people who pick it up probably won't put it down until they're done with it, or if they can afford to do that time-wise. The book is called "What to Do When You're Dead." So, did you ask that specific question? I know we cross over. I believe that, but we cross back sometimes. I don't know. Maybe sometimes I believe that. So. I'm not so sure.
Well, it's just like in literature. The title of a book is sometimes woven through many other things in the book, and it's a theme that ran through the book. But there is no answer. Okay, here's what you do. But God does say in there that at a point when your body passes, your soul has a choice to either go back into a body, to return to a body, or to return to the realm of God, which is where your spirit goes when the body passes. If the soul doesn't figure it out quickly enough, it can be stuck in the realm between. And if you become stuck in the realm between, then your body can become trapped to the past that you were and trapped on earth. And in this book, God talks about the past of man's self-destruction and the very great importance of our learning our own purpose, so that when the body passes, we will have fulfilled our purpose and can return to the realm of God.
And the forgiveness of sins that is taught by...
We have to forgive our own sins. It's not about God forgiving. God is always forgiving. We must forgive ourselves, because it's in that forgiving that we're able to let go of this past life.
How much time passed after you lost your job and you lost your love, that you found another job and found another love interest, or did you?
You mean when I found my husband?
Yes.
I found him within 3 days of moving down here. So I had been...
Wow.
The minute I let go of New York and moved to Houston, I met him within 3 days.
Oh,
wow. So that was a good sign.
Yeah.
Very good sign.
Sondra, for fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for being on the air with us today. The book is called What to Do When You're Dead. Sondra Sneed is the author. Sondra, how do we get the book? Do you have a website you want to tell us about?
Sure. It's sondrasneed.com. That's SONDRASNEED.com. And if people go there, you get a free download if you sign up for my weekly Weisenheimer, which is
Oh, I like that.
it's kind of an addendum to the book in a sense. I take difficult passages from the book and then have God go further in explanation, and those come out every week and every Wednesday.
Sondra, thank you so much for being on the air with us today. Fascinating
Thank you
topic
for having me.
and great
Thank
conversation. Thank you. The website again, sondrasneed.com. The book, What to Do When You're Dead. We'll take a little break and we'll be right back.
You're listening to WOCA News Talk 1370, Ocala's source for what's happening in today's hottest, up-to-date news and topics.
You've got a garden, and we've got a show for you called You've Got a Garden with your host, Master Gardener Carol Ann Baldwin. Carol Ann answers your questions about your flowers, your veggies, your grass, your trees, even questions about your bugs. And she's only on WOCA, so don't miss Carol Ann Baldwin and You've Got a Garden each Tuesday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on WOCA The Source.
Keep up with what's going on in the downtown area with Ocala Downtown Newspaper. Delivering thousands of newspapers to businesses in the downtown area, Ocala Downtown is there to keep you informed. They even have Tom's Picks, a free referral for people who are looking for a company to do work for them. Tom's Picks will refer the company that fits your needs, and all we ask in return is that you tell them where you heard about it. It's simple. For more info, just call Tom's Picks, 352-804-1223, and pick up your copy of the Downtown Ocala newspaper today.
Now read Ocala Downtown Newspaper online.
ABC News Now. I'm Karen Chase. What's in your dinner to make sure the answer isn't antibiotics?